Hey, what's up? I wanted to do a little owner review here of the Mazda CX-90 plug-in hybrid, the PHEV or PHEV as we call it here. We bought this vehicle, actually we leased it, and I'll tell you about that in a second. We leased it about 4 or 5 months ago, and we really find it to be a unique vehicle. There's a lot that it has going for it. It's really kind of very technologically interesting and suits a lot of various needs, and also is a great value. The numbers on this are great. You could find a ton of reviews on YouTube that are going to show you how it compares against other vehicles in its segment and performance and all that stuff. I'm going to focus more on what it's like to own and the dollars and cents that go behind it. But a little bit here, I'll just tell you about the vehicle. It is, we got the 8-passenger preferred version here with the middle bench seat. We have a family of 5. Let me show you here. I'll move this forward. We got a family of 5. So there's the back seat and a Labrador. And we're coming from a minivan, is what we had before. But we needed something with a little more SUV capabilities and something that was, you know, nicer, I suppose, right? And this is what we decided on. I really just thought the mix of features and that this vehicle has going forward is so interesting. So let's talk about that for a second. Yes, it's a plug-in hybrid, 8-passenger, all-wheel drive SUV, which makes it very rare. There's only a couple others on the market. Volvo makes one, which costs a lot more money. I believe Lexus is about to launch one, which is again going to cost a lot more money. And then there's a Mitsubishi, which is much cheaper and much smaller. Now, all of the CX-90s are actually hybrids, and they all have some, battery capability, and it helps them to average on 25, 26 miles a gallon, which again, for an all-wheel drive 8-passenger SUV is pretty good. But the plug-in is unique in that you will get about 25 miles on pure electric before the hybrid mode kicks in. So what that does, depending on your use cycle, can really mean a lot. Like for us, my wife's work commute is just a little bit more than that round trip. And then we do a lot of local running around to take kids to sporting events and stuff like that. And the balance is we end up probably doing the majority of our miles on pure electric, and we have an overall average of almost 60 miles a gallon. Of course, we are using electricity, but the electricity is much less expensive than gasoline. Okay, here we are. We pop the hood, and then you'll see another hood, and inside that is our powertrain here. And what you have here is, I believe it's a 2.5 liter inline 4, and then you have the 17 kilowatt electric motor behind that. Combined, they make for 323 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. So it's quite a bit of power, plenty of power, and an 8-speed automatic transmission that it's driven through. Interestingly, if you look down here, you'll see right down there is your axle running through. That's your front axle. So this is technically, the motor is behind that front axle. Very unusual for a modern car. There's quite a bit of space here between between your radiator and your motor. I don't know that they do that for ease of work. I think it's just more for the handling characteristics that Mazda likes to impart upon its vehicles. It's more of a mid-engine design for a 50-50 weight balance. The technology in this thing kind of blows my mind in the sense that you have an electric motor, you have a regular motor, you have the transmission, you have the all-wheel drive system, and all that interconnectedness makes for a much more complicated vehicle than I think most of us are used to driving. So of course that brings up a concern. How is it going to last over time? How is all this stuff going to work? Well, Mazda's got a decent record. Not the greatest, if I'm honest. If you look at the old rotary motors and the RX-7s and the Miller cycle motors from the Millennias, which were both technological marvels but didn't hold up all that well, but they still have their fans. Now, in this case, what we've done is we've leased it, and there's multiple reasons for that. One is it kind of mitigates any risk about the long-term reliability, but two, you also get a $7,500 tax credit from Mazda. We don't get it. Mazda gets it. So it's not on my taxes, but Mazda takes a $7,500 tax credit and cuts it off the price of the vehicle and then passes it through and then does the lease work. And then you can immediately buy the lease out if you'd like. And pardon the mess, this is our personal vehicle. But I want to show you, this is our sticker, okay? And this is where I think things get really interesting, because this vehicle, total MSRP, the way we had it built, and we ordered it, took about 90 days for this to come in exactly as we wanted it. Total MSRP comes into just under $50,000. You get the $7,500 tax credit taken right off that, which brings it down to, you know, $42,500. And then that $42,500 is converted into the lease payment, which you can immediately buy out. But in the end, you know, we're leasing it for just about $500 a month for this brand new vehicle. And if you then buy it out, you have this vehicle for $42,000, which is a lot of car for the money, which is rare in this day and age. You know, an 8-passenger all-wheel drive vehicle. It also weighs 5,300 pounds net, so the gross vehicle weight is over 6,000. So if you're using it for business purposes, you could do a Section 179 deduction also. That's another part of the math that makes it interesting. And so let's go over some of the numbers. And here are the numbers. You can pause on the screen to see for yourself, but ultimately we save about 20% in total energy costs over standard hybrid version of the CX-90. And we do it on our regular 120 volt outlet at home, charging overnight. No upgrade needed. And you got to remember, we're talking about an 8-passenger SUV. A comparative SUV getting 15 miles a gallon would cost nearly $12,000 in more energy over 100,000 miles. So this is a lot of car and a lot of capability for $42,000. And now that you understand the value proposition, let's get back to how much we like it. When it comes to space for the family, the CX-90 is not quite what our minivan was, but we knew that going into it. You know, we did get the bench seats so we could sit 3 across in the back if we had to use the entire trunk space. Here is our trunk space, loaded up with some big bags and beach chairs and stuff like that with the 3rd row up. Obviously, you drop that 3rd row and it increases quite a bit. So we figured if in a pinch we can put 3 across in that middle back seat. It also splits along the right side here, so we could even use this one rear seat here and then use this area for luggage. So ultimately, it's versatile enough to handle our needs while being super efficient and nice to drive. One niggling thing, as I am 6'3", if you want to hold this for me for a sec. When I get in this vehicle, I go like this. So I bang my knee right here on this HVAC vent every now and then, because if I'm doing it quick, I just go, you know? So I have to be a little more diligent when I slip in. But once I'm in, I'm perfectly fine. Steering wheel feels great. It's just Mazda standard. I think it's the same one in all their cars. HVAC controls are beautiful. In fact, I think they're probably the best, the nicest that I've seen. You know, decent front space storage here, already filled with stuff, obviously, but nice finishing and nice touches. This is not a touch screen. You see some complaints about that online. It's all controlled from this dial right here, but ultimately it's fine. You get used to it and it's no big deal. So here is the standard, the default normal driving mode. If I come down here to this switch and I hit this switch, it changes the modes, and I can select the sport mode, where you see it brings out a tachometer more prominently, or I can go down to EV mode, in which case the gauges do that cool thing there, and it focuses, you see on the left hand side, the regenerative braking and the charging of the battery, so it's focusing the information on that. Then if I hit it again, I go into the off-road mode. And again, the gauges will change now to go back to showing a tachometer, and then it'll show a little compass in front. So gauges are pretty cool. Typically, we will keep it in normal mode unless we are, you know, trying to drive pure EV and maximize efficiency, and we keep it in EV mode for that. We've been averaging, as you see over here, over 50 miles a gallon total since we've been driving. But I would say, you know, there's some times where we're closer to 70, just depending on how much electricity we're using, how quickly we can plug it in and recharge. So, in characteristic Mazda fashion, the CX-90 drives pretty good. You know, it's no sports car. It's still 5,300 pounds. However, you know, the steering, the handling, all that stuff is you know, pretty sharp for what it is. You know, we have it here in EV mode. There is actually a noticeable difference if you kick it into sport mode. If you're so interested, it does turn on the motor and it'll hold the gears higher while you're driving. You can actually hear, I don't know if you can pick it up, but you can hear it. Of course, I'm stuck behind some slow cars, but you can hear the motor holding that higher gear, so it's kind of ready and eager to leap forward and accelerate. But it'll still get good fuel economy, even in that sport mode. When we're cruising around town, we usually just keep it in EV mode or in the normal mode, which generally runs on EV, unless you really put the pedal down and want to get all that hybrid power. Interestingly, for this vehicle, no matter whether it's in electric or hybrid mode with the engine running and the electric motor running, it all sends the power through the transmission. So even in electric mode, you have the gears that you're stepping through.
Yeah, even electric mode has gears in it. So
which is really cool and unique, and different from what I've experienced driving other electric cars. It gives you that sensation, but very much like a normal car. There's not that much difference to it. Now, being that I'm just stuck behind somebody going super slow, we're just going to knock it back into EV mode and enjoy this ride on electrons. One thing, you know, not everything's perfect. You know, the throttle, kind of the toe in on the throttle, there's just so much going on from a powertrain perspective. Sometimes maybe, you know, the vehicle's trying to figure out what you're trying to do as the driver. Maybe that's the only thing I can describe it to. But if you're in electric mode and you're at a stop, but you got to go heavy throttle into an intersection, it's just not as fluid as a standard, you know, vehicle's throttle is. It's got plenty of power. You're going to merge into the intersection just fine, but it's just not as smooth. And I think you see that also in other drivability scenarios. When you're up and cruising, it's perfectly fine. You don't notice anything. It's more stop and go or like heavy throttle applications. It takes kind of a second to figure out what it wants to do. Stay in electric, go to, you know, turn on the motor into hybrid mode. So I think it's kind of natural with a lot of these plug-in hybrids because there's so much going on. So another thing to think about is when you're, you know, you have this situation where the motor's cutting on every now and then for small increments. You know, like I just merged into an intersection and the motor cut on and was on literally for 5 seconds and then was off. You know, in a cold environment, it's wintertime now, you would think that's probably not really great for the internal combustion motor. Lots of cold starts, never getting an opportunity to really warm up. I don't know if Mazda or other plug-in hybrid vehicle manufacturers are taking that into consideration, because you think long-term durability on the motor, that could be wearing it quicker, but I don't know. It's to be determined. It's just something to think about. One thing that is definitely not a concern is the build quality, which is impeccable from nearly any standard. And in fact, there's some YouTube reviews out there where people are making claims that this is one of the best manufactured cars in the world. Finally, one of the reasons we chose this vehicle was we needed something with more capability than the minivan we had prior, including pulling our boat out a gravel ramp, which the CX-90 does beautifully, and then also a little mild off-roading, typically to go hunting in relatively remote areas. But again, nothing crazy, nothing extremely hardcore, but something the CX-90 does that our prior vehicle could not. In the end, I'm a really big fan of the Mazda CX-90 plug-in hybrid. It's one of the most unique value propositions and vehicles on the market. So I highly suggest that if your use profile is something similar to ours, that you go ahead and check it out.